I unlocked the dark secrets of a vengeful doctor in the ICU. What I found was unimaginable. I never should have opened that door. The moment I turned the knob, a cold chill crept up my spine, and it felt as if the air thickened around me. The ICU was supposed to be a place of healing, but there was an oppression, a weight pressing down on my chest that told me something was very, very wrong. I went about my nightly rounds like I always did. The fluorescent lights blinked like dying stars over the whitewashed walls, making everything feel eerie and surreal. The hum of machines blended with distant whispers, almost like the patients were trying to tell me something through the relentless beeping of heart monitors. The sharp smell of antiseptic mingled with something rotten lingering at the edges of my consciousness. I froze. Then came the sound. A soft scrape that sent prickles across my skin, freezing my heart in place. It echoed through the deserted corridor, a solitary scream trapped in the silence. My hands trembled as I stepped closer, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. As I reached for the door, a hint of a shadow flickered behind the glass, dark and twisting. I hesitated. What lay beyond? An unsettling dread settled in my stomach. The stories about the vengeful doctor had circulated among the staff, whispers of neglect, tainted medications, unexplainable deaths. Some said he took pleasure in the suffering. The hushed tones of desperate families left echoing in the halls after Head left a room. Who was he really? What had he done? As I unlocked the door, I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. The creak of the door broke the stillness, and I stepped inside. My heart pounded, thudding loudly in my ears as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. I glanced around, taking in the beds lined with limp figures, pasty faces lit by the ghostly glow of monitors. And then I saw it, a figure in the corner, half hidden in the shadows. It moved. My breath caught. Was it him? Somehow, it seemed alive yet distant, with an aura that screamed danger. The room felt suffocating. I wanted to back away, to run, but I was frozen, anchored by fear and curiosity. Suddenly, the figure turned towards me, revealing a face twisted with rage. A scream bubbled in my throat, but before I could make a sound, the door slammed shut behind me, cutting off my escape. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The face leered at me, its eyes glowing like embers in the oppressive darkness. An unsettling silence enveloped the room, one that stretched on, full of unspoken horrors. I staggered back instinctively, my heart racing, barely able to comprehend the nightmare before me. Help me, the voice slithered out, jagged and hoarse, cutting through the stillness. It was nothing like I expected. Deep down, an insistent tremor of recognition stirred. It belonged to a patient I had seen earlier. A frail man in bed 5, murmuring about shadows lurking behind his eyes, whispering secrets of betrayal. But why was he here, cloaked in the dismal shadows instead of the bed I'd left him in? No, I gasped, shaking my head. As the apparition took a step toward me, the fluorescent lights flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows against the walls. The stench of decay filled the air, once fresh and antiseptic, now tainted, a putrid reminder of the decay below. The distance between us shrank, and I could feel his presence like a chill creeping through my bones. An empty ache that gripped my soul. That I turned to the door, but it was as if it had vanished into the very ether of nightmare. Panic surged within me. Open. Let me out. The sound of my own voice seemed foreign, desperate, distant. The room felt alive, and it roared with energy as I felt a disturbance, something stirring beneath the surface of reality, challenging my very sanity. Then the whispers sprang to life, swirling around me, darting past my ears. He's watching, they hissed. He sees everything. My pulse quickened. The shadows in the corners deepened, morphing into grotesque forms, slithering along the edge of my vision. I was not alone. The figurite lunged. I recoiled, instincts sharpening, and scrambled backward, my body colliding into a rigid, unyielding surface. Desperate, I fumbled for the wall and found what felt like a knife, or perhaps a scalpel, cold and metallic against my trembling fingers. Please, I whispered, trying to piece together logic, rational thought forged in this hellish reality. I pressed the blade against the approaching darkness, instinctively attempting to ward off whatever horror lay before me. But then I paused. The shadow was still. Then it smiled. The twisted visage melted away, revealing the familiar face of Dr. Hargrove, his predatory grin sending waves of panic surging through me. "You found your way back," he said, the voice a haunting echo of the past intertwined with the cries of the soul's head taken. "You must uncover the truth, or they will drown you as they did me." Footsteps echoed ominously from the hallway just beyond the door firm, unwavering, like the tread of a beast with a singular intent. I could see the whitish light spilling underneath, and the dread of who or what was about to emerge sent serrated shivers down my spine. "Help me find them," the apparition begged, the words mixed with despair, "before they take you too." I felt an overwhelming urge to turn away, to run from this terrifying specter. But the door shook violently as the footsteps drew nearer. The shadows behind Dr. Hargrove loomed larger, a cacophony of torment rising, pulsating around us like a black tide. I stammered, fear rooting me in place as the wooden door splintered under the force of whatever was trying to gain entry. Fractional seconds morphed into an eternity wrapped in terror, and I had but one desperate choice. With a fractured cry, I plunged the blade toward Dr. Hargrove, a misguided attempt to cleave through the apparitionto, sever the anchor tethering us to this malignant realm of the damned. But instead of dispersing, the darkness erupted. It howled, convulsing. Reality itself seemed to buckle, and as the truth clawed up my throat, something immense and furious forced the door open, spilling malevolence into our fragile standoff. An icy gust howled, battering the room, and the air thickened with screams that choked the atmosphere, drowning out reason. My heart thundered in wild panic as I was hurled back into the clutches of the abyss, with shadows reaching eagerly toward me. Then, as I fell, I glimpsed the truth lurking at the edges of my awareness. I had unlocked the door, but the darkness was coming for me too, and soon I would discover just how deep the horrors ran, in the very soul of the hospital itself. I hit the ground, the world around me swirling into chaos, and time halted. From within that consuming dark, I glimpsed a figure's still warm body, eyes pleading against the rising tide of shadow, a patient I had never known. And as the shadows closed in and the unearthly whispers clawed at my mind, I realized I knew my next choice: fight, or succumb to that which had been awakened. Before I could scream my resolve, the darkness engulfed me. I was lost, but not without a fight. I awoke on the floor, a cold chill sweeping across my skin. The room was twisted, the walls appearing to quake as if they held the weight of the sins embedded in their plaster. My breath came in frantic gasps, echoing as the shadows coiled tighter around me. I had plunged into darkness, but now it seemed merely a veil over something far more grotesque. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically overhead, sparking ominous patterns against the stifling shadows. A low thrum pulsed through the air, reverberating in a maddening rhythm that thrummed with the dread of countless souls. I could swear I felt them, whispering in hidden corners, their long-forgotten screams yearning to be heard, clawing at the fragile sieve that separated sanity from despair. "Help me," a voice meandered through the folds of darkness, soaked in sorrow and longing. I recoiled, sensing its familiar resonance, yet uncertain of its source. My heart raced. Was this another manifestation of the doomed souls that haunted me, or the hollow echoes of the living? I struggled to my feet, only to catch sight of movement from the corner of my eye. The figure that had once been Dr. Hargrove materialized anew, no longer smiling, the expression twisted into one of utmost rage. It shimmered like a heat wave, flickering between forms, revealing grotesque faces of the patients he had wronged. their eyes hollow but pleading, "Why did you wake them?" His voice sliced into my mind like a sharpened blade. "They were meant to remain hidden. You had the chance to find peace." Panic surged as I stumbled backward, instinctively reaching for the knife I had earlier apprehended, but it was gone. The weightlessness of despair crushed me as I realized I was empty-handed, vulnerable. The room twisted, disorienting me as I grasped for context. A reflection of the untold horrors strewn about like forgotten memories. Outside the room, the echoing footsteps grew stronger, closer. They possessed a rhythm that echoed with urgency, each stomp reverberating against the walls, throbbing with a malevolence that suggested something far worse than I had ever faced. My instincts screamed this was not just a psychological torment, but a corporeal threat teetering on the precipice of reality. "Join us," the whispers beckoned, coaxing me toward the darkness pooling in the corners. Names slipped through my mind like grains of sand. Ashley, Martin, Oliver, the restless souls trapped, begging to be acknowledged. "I can't." I screamed into the abyss, feeling the anguish of desperation clawing at my throat. "I don't want to be one of you." The shadows shrieked in response, twisting and churning as if my words had ignited a firestorm. From their midst rose visceral forms, reaching and grasping, black tendrils winding around my arms, pulling me into the depths. I could feel their anguish, a cold grip of fear wrapping around my entirety, but I would not surrender. I shook my head violently, refusing to yield to their calls, straining against the clutches of the unseen. Then a flash of light, blinding and ethereal, illuminated the room in a kaleidoscope of colors. My eyes burned from the brightness, and when I looked up through the cloud of shadows, I saw them, the faces of my patients, hovering, translucent, fingernails clawing at the very fabric of the air, their mouths forming silent screams. They pointed toward a door at the far end of the room, previously hidden, looming as a promise of escape or perhaps deeper horrors. "Run." The familiar voice of Dr. Hargrove echoed in my mind, now tinged with urgency, "or be consumed by what you have unleashed." In that instant, clarity gripped me more tightly than the shadows. I needed to move, to escape, to heed the warnings. With adrenaline surging, I bolted through the ethereal mass, the specters shrieking in fury, clawing at my back as I raced toward the door. Each step felt like a battle against time as I neared the threshold. Yet, as I reached for the knob, a hand clasped onto my shoulder, cold and clammy. I twisted around, encountering the ghostly visage of the man from bed 5, his eyes wide with a mournful warning. "Don't let them take you," he implored, but I felt the grasp of the darkness pull me deeper, threatening to overshadow his voice with its own dreadful roar. With a forceful yank, I twisted the knob and flung the door wide open. The light cascaded forth, illuminating the storm of shadows behind Mekarotic and Hungry, like a miasma of despair pouring into the world, attempting to breach the realm of the living. But then, with a crash, I stumbled into a void, blind to the world behind me as the door slammed shut. I gasped, fighting against an unfamiliar disorienting gravity that pulled at my core. Then, silence engulfed me, an overwhelming absence of sound that spoke of neither comfort nor fear. And just as I steadied myself against the darkness, I realized I was not alone. Hands gripped my wrists, cool and clammy, an unyielding grip, pulling me closer. I gasped, turning to see a figure beside me. One I knew all too well, another patient, eyes wide, staring into the depths of my own soul. "Help us," they croaked, raising a finger toward the never-ending expanse of darkness. Before it's too late. Trapped in this limbo, heart racing and filled with dread, I was handed a choice I never anticipated. Save myself and forsake the souls, or commit to the fight, risking everything to unearth the nightmare's elaborate design. The air faded further into inconceivable terror, and uncertainty festered within. Before I could respond, the light behind me flickered away, and all that remained was the haunting embrace of the endless shadows. I was left to wonder what lay ahead. Would I be the salvation or the final nail in the tomb? As the dread thickened around me once again, I managed to muster a single syllable, but just then, the encroaching darkness pressed in, threatening to consume my voice forever. The air grew heavier, saturated with an unrelenting chill that seemed to seep through my skin and chill my bones. I stood paralyzed, the patient beside me a mere shadow now, an echo of the unholy torment framing our lives. Help us, their voice faded into a whisper, swallowed by the oppressive dark. I forced my feet to move, dragging me away from the haunting specter, drawn into an abyss laden with despair. But as I made my way forward, the ground beneath me pulsed, as if the very earth was alive, breathing, exhaling its own malevolence. Each step sent tremors of dread cascading through my entirety. Something was off. The air thickened, not just with fear but a palpable sense of being hunted. I could feel eyes watching from unseen corners of the void, invisible terrors that craved to taste my despair. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice trembling as the shadows echoed back my fear. Nothing answered. It was an invitation that twisted my heart, an opening in the depths of the dark that promised horror. And I could not ignore the pull that I hesitated, but the thrumming in the air intensified, a heartbeat that echoed in sync with my own. It wasn't just the whispers of lost souls anymore. It felt more like a warning, a siren beckoning me to turn back. Clenching my fists, I pressed onward, driven by an instinctual need to confront the oppressive specters of my past. Entranced by fragmented memories, I ventured deeper into the darkness, where time twisted into grotesque forms. Faces of familiar patients appeared and vanished in the murk, their eyes hollow yet glowing seek my attention. I gripped my head, trying to dispel the visions that threatened my sanity. "You're not real," I screamed, but they simply lingered, haunting shadows clinging to my subconscious. The cold tendrils reached out again, swirling around my ankles, attempting to drag me down into the sinister depths waiting just beneath the surface of reality. I pulled away, only to lose my footing on the invisible precipice. A scream caught in my throat as I fell, a sickening plummet into darkness that swallowed me whole. When I crashed onto the ground, the air burst from my lungs, replaced by a vile smell, the fetid odor of decay and bitterness hanging heavy around me. I crawled on the floor, fingers grazing rough stone, desperately searching for a way out. My vision swam as I peered into the abyss, and then, a flick-era dim light illuminated the wall in front of me, revealing ancient symbols etched into the stone. Curiosity tempered my panic as I approached the markings, feeling an overwhelming urge to decipher them. Each symbol resonated with a deep-seated vibration that thrummed through my fingertips, shedding light on the twisted medical practices of the past. Cure and sacrifice merged in a ceaseless loop that encapsulated the darkness this place had become. Suddenly, a low growl echoed, breaking the stillness, a primal rumble filled with rage and malice, reverberating through the stone walls like a death knell. I froze, sensing that whatever dwelled in this darkness was not just a specter of despair but something corporeal, a guardian of the nightmares that plagued those forgotten. That it emerged from the blackness, an undulating mass of shadows and torment, a creature born of every anguished soul this place had devoured. Eyes like burning coals fixed upon me, swirling in a tempest of rage and sorrow. The air crackled with electricity, surrounding me in a tempest of hatred and an insatiable hunger. "Why do you intrude?" The voice tore through the darkness, raspy yet somehow familiar, dripping with the essence of every soul that had wandered into this cursed limbo. "Are you here to join them? To drown in their anguish?" Unable to speak, I instinctively recoiled. The creature lunged forward, and I stumbled backward, the symbols blurring as I fell again, losing myself in a myriad of shapes and sounds. "Remember why you're here," the creature taunted, its voice weaving through my thoughts with an icy precision. "You've awakened them, unleashed their rage. Now you must pay the price." The weight of its gaze bore into my very essence, peeling back layers of my sanity. I gasped, realizing the truth burrowed within the labyrinth of my mind, gnawing at the remnants of who I once was. The lives I couldn't save, the faces that had haunted my dreams. Was I truly here to save them, or would I simply become another silent scream lost to the void? Before I could comprehend what lay ahead, the ground shook violently beneath me, fracturing in severed pieces. I felt the air grow thick, choking me as the creature roared, its form shifting, twisting, looming ever closer. Just as I braced myself for what would come next, I caught a glimpse through the chaos, a glimmer of hope hidden within the depths. But as quickly as it appeared, the shadows consumed it, tightening their grip around me, and I was left staring into the heart of darkness. My breath caught in my throat as the creature lunged for me, and then I understood I had a choice. Face my demons or allow them to swallow me whole. As the shadows closed in and the creature prepared its final strike, a whisper erupted from the corners of my mind, urging me to act. If I wished to restore the lost souls, I had to confront the truth lurking beneath my own fears. In that moment of clarity, the dark sucked the breath from my lungs, and I realized I wasn't ready for what came next, a revelation separating salvation from damnation, lying just beyond the precipice of my own shattered sanity. The creature's maw stretched, a grotesque yawning chasm that promised oblivion. Shadows whipped around me like whirling dervishes as I felt the floor beneath dissolve into a nightmarish landscape. The walls bled a deep crimson, and the air vibrated with the anguished cries of forsaken souls. My breath quickened, each inhale heavy with the scent of iron and despair. A jolt of adrenaline grounded me for just a moment, flooding my veins with cold clarity. I remembered the stories whispered among the nursing staff, the rumors that whispered of dark experiments and vanished patients. We were taught to care, to heal, but there were things even the most well-meaning of us could not comprehend. This darkness was born from that unending hunger I had sensed all along, the thirst for control, for the power to stitch life and death together into a tapestry of suffering. Suddenly, a snap rang through the air like the crack of a whip, and with it came the heavy sensations of dread pressing upon my shoulders. The creature hesitated, a flicker of confusion flipping through its eyes. I took advantage, desperately clawing my way backward, feeling the jagged stones cut into my palms. "Do you remember?" It hissed, reforming its shape, morphing into the faces of those I had failed: a bereaved father, a timid child, a dying mother. "They will not let you go until you face your sins. Leave them out of this," I screamed, striking out against the tendrils reaching for me, my fists solid yet soft with lingering doubt. "They are innocent." "Innocent?" The creature's voice dripped with venom, the shadows shifting into a mass of angry faces, each of them shouting their accusations, their pain reverberating against the hollow emptiness. "The innocent rot in their graves because you were too weak to save them." Heat pricked at the back of my eyes, and I became consumed by the cacophony of their suffering. The more I fought the rising tide of horror, the deeper I fell into its embrace. Memories of my own failures cascaded over me, each stumbled question, each dismissive shrug. The nights spent in the ICU haunted by the flickering lights of machines disconnected from life. "Look closer," the creature urged, its voices melding into Oni chorus of mourning and wrath. "Do you think it was all for nothing? You opened the door to the abyss." Realization surged within me like a painful lament, tying knots in my heart. I had come to confront this darkness, yet I was merely a pawn, just another piece in the ill-fated game. This creature, these lost souls had been waiting for me to unravel their story, to give voice to the unrecognizable pain hidden in the stony facade of the hospital I served. I had walked the line between salvation and damnation, yet I had never dared to cross it until now. The shadows around me began to congeal, reforming around my body as though seeking to absorb every ounce of my resolve. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, the words slipping through my cracked lips like a desperate prayer. A haunting silence settled, the multitude falling still, and it was only then that I felt a cold finger trace the edge of my consciousness. "Reveal the secrets of the doctor. Unlock the door of truths concealed beneath layers of deceit. Only then will we be free, and only then can you save us." Their pleas wormed into my heart, a beckoning of buried memories, dripping files, hidden treatments, and the glint of a physician's blade in the dead of night. "You weren't just a physician," I whispered to the void, my voice tightening with conviction. "You were a monster." The shadows surged forward, the creature's form glowing briefly with an ethereal light as an opening gaped between realities. "Then unlock the truth," it murmured, a promise and a threat layered into one. "But beware, the horrors you will unearth may be your own undoing." With no time for hesitation, I summoned every ounce of willpower. I reached deep within the recesses of my mind, determined to grasp the secrets encoded in the fabric of my being, desperate to break this cycle of horror. I could feel the darkness within me quivering, recoiling at the idea of illumination. Just as the shadows closed in, I felt the first tendrils of understanding unfurl. A memory long submerged began to rise, heavy with the weight of repressed fears. I glimpsed a sterile room, saw the flicker of dim fluorescent lights overhead, and then, through the mist of time, a figure taking notice, a doctor whispering incantations of healing, masking something far more sinister. It wasn't merely the patient's pain I had to confront. It was the doctor's fragmented morality, the horrors I had turned a blind eye to. A nightmarish truth waited to burst forth, and as I delved further into the depths of my recollections, the room began to tremble, the faces of the damned swirling in anticipation. The walls resounded with a sickening crack as one of them broke through the doctor's face, twisted with rage and longing, blazing through the shadows, a freshly sprung wound of chaos that separated reality from the familiar. "You meddlesome fool," it snapped, and with that utterance, I knew this descent into truth would come with unending ramifications. The ground beneath me shrieked, and I stood at the edge of a void, my heart pounding in sync with the howls of the forsaken. And just then, I understood how deep the roots of horror spread. Before I could brace myself, the shadows surged forward, and the doctor's voice echoed through the reverberating darkness, chilling me to the core. "You have opened the door, and now I will reclaim what is rightfully mine." And in that instant, reality twisted and warped, and I was cast into an unfathomable abyss. My sanity fraying as the shadows flooded in, twisting into screams, laughter, and despair. I was losing myself, the truth fading until I glimpsed that one flicker again. And it was enough to realize the choice that lay ahead of me: to confront a monster reborn from my darkest fears, or to abandon the lost souls to the never-ending cycle of torment, forever haunting the mortal realm. And as the darkness enveloped me, I heard the words that would seal my fate. "Welcome back, Doctor." The world twisted in a slow, agonizing spiral, like the last gasps of a dying star. I was somewhere other than the hospital, but I could still feel its presence, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the acrid scent of decay that seemed to seep from the walls of every room. The shadows coiled around me, taunting and whispering threats that resonated with the echo of my unfulfilled promises. Forgotten lives, they chanted, forgotten pain. Your duty was to heal, yet you willingly let them suffer. The faces of the damned flicked in and out of existence. I clawed at my memories, sifting through fragmented images like a drowning man reaching for the surface. There it was, a glimpse of what lay beneath the bright veneer of my hospital. The surgical theater, often sulking in deep shadows, where I was complicit in a network of silence. A part of me had dismissed the unsettling behavior of my mentor, the doctor who vanished the night of the incident, whose eyes harbored the secret of how pain could be repurposed, twisted into something grotesquely beautiful. And then, as if summoned by my fear, the doctor emerged through the thick shadows. His figure glimmered with a sickly aura as he stepped toward me, his white coat tattered and stained, an eerie contrast to the pitch-black void around us. "Ah, my prodigal pupil," he taunted, his voice smooth as silk yet brimming with the weight of malice. "You've come to view the masterpiece we crafted together. Isn't it splendid? Our patients were but mere tools in our grand experiment, a symphony written in suffering." "Stop! This isn't an experiment," I screamed, the words ripping from me like a plea. They were human beings, with lives and families. "Humanity is a fragile mask," he laughed, a sound that chilled my blood. "What did you think happens when those masks slip? You could have understood that if you hadn't turned a blind eye. But now, you're here to witness the results of your willful ignorance." As he spoke, the darkness thickened, walls pulsating with the frenetic energy of souls trapped within, their shrieks turning into a maddening choir of denial and rage. I wanted to close my eyes against the sight, but I could feel their fragile hopes and desperate fears gripping me, dragging me deeper into this morbid exhibit. "Look at them," he urged, his hand sweeping dramatically toward a nightmarish tableau. Figures emerged from the veil of shadows, once patients, now grotesque caricatures of suffering. Their limbs twisted and elongated, faces contorted into masks of anguish, whispering my name, their eyes hollow, accusing. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the faces, deprecated memories of those who had passed through my care. I saw the little girl who clutched a stuffed bunny, her eyes pleading for healing that never came. The agonized father too meek to fight against the darkness. the mother whose smile had faded into something unrecognizable long before her last breath. They drifted, silently reaching out towards me, their lips moving in slow, agonizing cries that shattered my very core. I could not break under the weight of their pain. I needed to settle the score, for their grieved souls and mine. I steeled myself and turned to face the doctor, whose gaze bore down on me with malicious satisfaction. "You will join them, you know," he continued, an infernal excitement lighting his features. "You cannot escape the cycle. You are a healer, and a healer must bear the burden of those they failed." "No!" I bellowed, the rage inside me flickering brighter than the darkness around. "I will confront this curse. You do not own my spirit." With newfound resolve, I lifted my hand as a wave of energy cascaded forth, illuminating the chamber and scattering shadows like autumn leaves buffeted by an unseen gale. "I will bring your darkness into the light." But as I stood resolute, a deafening roar erupted from the abyss, reverberating with grief and despair, eclipsing my voice. The floor shook violently beneath me as a chasm opened wide, revealing horrors writhing within physical manifestations of guilt and torment, clawing upwards in a grotesque frenzy. The doctor's smile faded, replaced with a furious snarl. "Fool! You think you can purify this place? You'll become nothing more than another lost soul seeking solace in vengeance." The shadows fractured as the chasm gaped wider, and with one final push, I hurled myself towards the heart of darkness, willing to confront whatever lay at its center. As I dove into the void, I could feel the weight of countless regrets crashing down, pulling me into an endless spiral of despair. In that moment, just as despair closed in like a vice, I caught sight of it. The truth flickering like a candle's flame, revealing the outlines of a hidden experiment doctors standing over beds, whispering words that twisted flesh, merging life with the forbidden. But before I could grasp it fully, the darkness surged, and a deafening scream shattered the fabric of my consciousness, a sound so visceral it coiled around my heart, squeezing until I gasped for air. And then, as abruptly as silence follows a storm, I was thrown back into the hospital hallway, lying on the filthy floor, breathless and trembling. Eerie lights flickered overhead, illuminating a scene that chilled me to the bone. In the corridor stood a figure, a ghostly apparition of twisted flesh wearing my own face, not a reflection, but something far more sinister. "Welcome back to your own hell," it sneered, its voice echoing within me, and I realized too late that the ordeal had only just begun. The apparition's grin widened as I stumbled to my feet, driven by a primal instinct to escape the nightmare that had become my reality. It wore my face, but there was a cruel malice behind its eyes, a promise of darkness I had not yet fathomed. "Do you remember us?" it hissed, stepping forward with an unnatural grace. Each movement sent a chill coursing through my spine, as if the air itself recoiled from the dread it embodied. "Every time you failed to recognize the suffering, every time you turned away from the truth, we grew stronger." I pressed my back against the cold wall, frantically scanning the dim corridor for an escape. The sterile tiles, usually reassuring, were now a labyrinth of despair. The haunting echoes of the past reverberated in my mind, the failed surgeries, the lives lost because I hesitated, the whispers that questioned my every decision. "Stop!" I shouted. "This isn't real. You're not me. I am everything you're afraid to confront." It countered, each word dripping with contempt. "You buried us deep, thinking that silence would quell our cries. Yet here I am, born from the very neglect you stitched into your heart." My hands trembled, warmth pooling in my palms as I instinctively conjured energy, a response born from instinct. But as the light manifested, the apparition cackled louder, its form shifting in grotesque malleability. "How precious, your hope! But light only throws shadows, and shadows are where I thrived." In a mad scramble, I began racing down the corridor, my breath rapidly escaping my lungs. The familiar walls warped around me, transforming into grotesque paintings that depicted scenes of despair. Patients I had failed clawing helplessly against invisible barriers, their mouths formed into silent screams. The air thickened, a rancid miasma swirling and wrapping itself around my throat. I rounded a corner and collided into a resistencia mass of writhing bodies tangled and contorted, emerging from a doorway marked staff only. Their hollow eyes glinted with anger, mouths gaping wide open as if to consume me whole. A disembodied voice danced through the air, echoing my deepest fears. You cannot run. We are you, and you are us. Panic surged, flooding my senses. I pushed back against the restless tide, focusing harder to summon a blast of radiant energy. The light exploded from my palms, illuminating their twisted forms momentarily. They flinched, recoiling from the sudden brightness, but another roar echoed through the hall, and the very walls responded, quaking ominously. Foolish healer, my shadow mocked, sliding effortlessly through the chaos towards me. You are but a drop of light in an ocean of darkness. Embrace it. With a final desperate push, I burst through the mass of lost souls and stumbled into another chamber, where jagged metal instruments lay scattered like bones in a grave. The sight was all too familiar, a true reflection of my former self, the once proud physician now reduced to a hysteria-stricken fugitive in a heart of shadows. Each breath I took felt more labored, the air thick with a dread that sank into my skin. I scanned the room, half expecting to find a way out. Instead, I came face to face with a great glass wall, beyond which lay the surgical theater, only it was twisted beyond recognition. A horrific tableau unfolded within. Otherworldly figures performed surgeries on helpless victims, but there was no anesthesia here, no relief from the ripping and tearing. Blood pooled on the floor, feeding a dark entity that writhed with satisfaction, drinking in the pain as if it were a fine wine. Above it all, I could see my mentor watching with a chilling smile, as if proud of his work, his hands stained red with the essence of suffering. My heart pounded relentlessly as my shadow advanced, pushing me to the edge of the glass. This is your legacy. Look closer. Remember what you did, or rather, what you failed to do. Suddenly, the glass wall began to crack with each of my racing thoughts. Memories surged within my patients, writhing in pain, their pleas muffled by the chaos of their own suffering, and, horrifyingly, faces of those bringing them torment in my name. With a deafening shattering sound, the glass collapsed as I recoiled, sending shards flying in every direction. I stumbled backward into the fading light, where the chaos surged toward me like a tidal wave. In that moment of chaos, the voice of my shadow rose above the cacophony, resonating within the marrow of my bones. You cannot escape your legacy. It will hunt you, twist you, devour you whole. Join us, and together we will rewrite the stories of those you abandoned. Before I could find my resolve, a wave of hands reached through the shimmering remnants where the glass had just been, their grasping fingers pulling me towards the void beyond. Despair chilled my very soul, and I heard the voices calling, pleading for salvation, for revenge, for acknowledgement. But right before their grip could seize me entirely, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing tall among them, a woman, ethereal and radiant, her face hauntingly familiar. Do not succumb, she cried, her voice cutting through the madness like a blade. You alone hold the key. And then, just as everything flickered to black, the world around me twisted yet again, and I felt myself tumbling deeper into the depths of horror, led by a horrifying realization that the figure from my past was not just another victim, but a part of the truth I was so desperately seeking. And then, I found myself staring into eyes that weren't mine, my own reflection twisted in anguish. The darkness swallowed me whole, sealing my fate in a way I couldn't begin to comprehend. The darkness throbbed around me like a living thing, each pulse a reminder of my dwindling sanity. I was adrift in a terrifying abyss, my heart pounding as the memories crashed against the fragile walls of my mind, threatening to break through and unleash their chaos. The figure, the woman who had begged me not to succumb, hovered in and out of my vision, her form shrouded in the shadows that clung to me like an invasive species, entwining themselves into my very essence. Remember us. Her voice crescendoed, slicing through the fabric of my torment. Remember the truth buried beneath the weight of your own guilt. With each word, images burst forth from my subconscious, a recollection buried under years of denial. I could see the operating room bathed in sterile light, the patient lying there, face obscured by the surgical drape, but the familiar scent of iron and antiseptic called forth a torrent of emotion. I remembered the sudden beeping of monitors signaling trouble, the frantic movements of my colleagues while I stood frozen, a specter of my own making. Don't let them pull you in, the woman urged again, her voice melting into a sob. But even as she spoke, shadows flicked at the corners of my vision, tugging at my limbs, urging me toward the dark embrace that promised oblivion. The palpable dread enveloped me as my surroundings shifted. The smooth, white walls of the hospital dissolved, replaced by molten shadows resembling the stark lines of a surgical theater. Instruments of dreadful innovation gleamed menacingly in the half-light, each one a promise of pain and neglect. He left you. The apparition echoed, words dripping with ice and venom. He let you fall, and now you have the audacity to think you can rise again. You are one of us now. Look suddenly, the floor trembled beneath my feet, fissures cracking open as if the hospital itself was crying out, betrayed by its secrets. Hands reached forth from below, an endless wave of desperation and rage clawing for my ankles. They were faces I recognized now, former patients caught in a web of torment I had woven with my failurous mass of contorted bodies, eternally caught between suffering and despair. Every decision, every choice, you abandoned them when they needed you most. They moaned in unison, their shrieks a haunting chorus that resonated within me. My shadowy cursed twin loomed like an executioner, ready to seal my fate. A wave of nausea swept through me as I grasped for clarity, fighting to remember the woman's face, the face I could not forget. Her spirit flickered like a candle in the tempest, but her light was faint against the surging tide of darkness. It was then I realized. She was the only witness to my tortured past and had borne the brunt of my neglect. Run. You must remember, she screamed, her visage contorting in agony, forcing me to confront the moment when I had sealed her fate with a choice made in fear, a decision I had buried deep in the recesses of my mind. The ground cracked further, and the very walls of this nightmarish hell began to ripple, dissolving between realities. I closed my eyes, feeling the earth shift beneath me, the cries crescendoing into a singular voice mine. I could see her clearly now, the one who had suffered at my hands, her eyes reflecting not just pain, but a flicker of hope. Face your demons, refuse to crumble. Only through acknowledgement can the darkness be banished. In that moment of clarity, my heart surged, and I pushed back against the clutches that sought to claim me. The sheer force of my will ignited a blinding light from within, illuminating the space around me, forcing the dark specters to recoil, albeit for an instant. But just as my resolve surged, the shadows coalesced with a deafening roar, morphing into something monstrous, and the light took a new shape, dark and towering, far beyond what I had faced before. The figure bore my face, but with a twisted grin, and it lunged at me with a speed that was nothing short of terrifying. You think a spark of light can purge centuries of darkness? It spat, voice laced with a horrid mockery. With each moment, my spirit faltered under its oppressive weight. I was battling not just my fears, but an entity born from Thema, reflection of every moment I had dared to turn a blind eye. The shadow lunged again, and I dove to the side just in time. My collision with the ground sent shockwaves through my spine, but I was alive, aware that I could still fight. Gathering what little energy remained, I rolled back to my feet, my heart pounding in my ears. Dio, you really think you can escape your destiny? My shadow taunted, edging closer, the weight of countless souls pressing behind it. But in the midst of the chaos, a chilling realization froze me in place. I turned, finally forcing myself to look directly at the ethereal woman, who was now fading, consumed by the shadows once more. The torment in her eyes was replaced with a profound understanding and unspoken warning. Choose, she whispered, dissolving into fragments of light that scattered into the infinite void. Then, as if the very fabric of reality rippled around me, fearlessness surged through me, fueled by the memory of my failure, and in the depths of the void, I screamed at the encroaching darkness. Show me the truth. And as my voice echoed into the chasm, the world imploded, and I felt the grip of 1,000 hands clutching my body, pulling me down into the abyss. In that moment, the line between salvation and damnation blurred, and I realized with a jolt that I would have to confront not just the darkness outside, but the darkness within, where the ultimate horror lay yet undiscovered. The descent felt eternal, a free fall into an abyss that devoured my scream. Tendrils of darkness wrapped around me, whispering secrets coded in malice and despair. Each pulse of chilling air scraped against my skin, as if the void was hungry for more than just my soul. Hope flickered like a dying ember, lost against the onrushing shadows. When I finally landed, I found myself amidst a fractured representation of the hospital, the walls twisted and dripping as if alive, the flesh of a beast mingling with remains of the past. The air thickened with a stench of decay, stifling and heavy. It felt suffocating, each breath a test of will. Here, echoes of former tormentors resonated off the warped surfaces, their disembodied whispers tearing at the very seams of my sanity. "You are back," they hissed, their voices slithering into my consciousness like snakes. "You cannot escape." I staggered forward, propelled by sheer terror and the knowledge that I had awakened something far more sinister than I had believed possible. The darkness clung to me, wrapping around my limbs, and as I fought to peel it away, the shadows took on grotesque forms, twisted limbs and agonized faces emerging from the walls, reaching with eager fingers that brushed against my skin, imbued with both anguish and accusation. "Join us," they cried in fervent unison, desperation tinged with the sweet taste of malevolence seeping into the air. I pressed on, navigating through this labyrinth of horrors, desperately searching for the truth the woman had begged me to find. But the ground quaked, and visions swirled around me like phantoms, revealing snippets of memories long buried. Each passing visage a former life cut short by clinical detachment, their faces morphing into a phantasmagoria that clawed at the edges of my mind. Suddenly, I was drawn to an ominous door. Its surface morphed into a grotesque smile, a parody of welcome and denial. It pulsated like a living heartbeat, and against every bit of reason in me, I felt compelled to reach out. The instant my fingers grazed the door's warped edges, the whispers rose to a cacophony of anguish and laughter, a dirge of my own making, echoing like a demand for reckoning. "Turn back," screamed a chorus of voices, now familiar to me, filled with the intonations of my failures. I hesitated, doubt clawing at my chest, but a darker urge propelled me forward. With a deep breath that mingled fear and resolve, I flung the door open. Inside lay a room, sterile surgical theater frozen in a moment of grotesque perfection. Instruments glinted under harsh overhead lights, their dangers lurking just out of sight. Yet it was the figure draped on the operating table that transfixed me. I felt a connection surge, as if this grotesque mockery of a once beautiful body was rooted deep within my own psyche. As I stepped closer, a paralyzing recognition struck meth woman's face, serene yet agonizingly twisted, lay beneath the drapes. Her eyes were shut, yet I could feel their weightan, unrelenting gaze pressing against my spirit. "You must remember," she whispered thinly, her lips barely moving, bathed in an ethereal glow that flickered like a candle in a tempest. I stumbled back, and a flash of clarity struck. I had made the choice to sever her from life when she had needed saving most, a moment of blind cowardice that had turned into a dark legacy. The dread coursed through me, and with it came the realization that this room was a reflection of all my guilt, the site of my deepest fears manifested into an electroshock of memories. But before I could process this, the mirror-like surface of the table rippled, smoke coiling up from its edges, curling around me like a lover's embrace. My shadow retreated, melding into the walls as something new emerged. I could feel the air grow heavier, saturated with sinister laughter. From the depths of the swirling dark mist, a figure rose, crafted from the very fears I had harbored, all the lost lives, the screams of the abandoned. "You think you can rewrite history?" it cawed, the voice echoing like a death knell. "You are the architect of your own tragedy." Desperation clawed at me as I understood. This entity wasn't just an extension of my guilt. It was the very embodiment of every soul I had forsaken. The woman on the table stirred, her eyes now open, reflecting an infinite void as she whispered, "Help us, as you help yourself." Their voices crescendoed into a unified chant, and the room quaked, transforming into a grotesque carnival of despair, flesh and cries intertwining in a dance of madness. It was then I realized, in my attempt to confront my demons, I had only summoned a fresh horror, one directly from the twisted marrow of my past. As shadows lunged toward me once more, and the laughter reached a fever pitch. I could feel the abyss open wide beneath me. The door slammed shut, sealing off any semblance of escape, leaving me face to face with the manifestation of every terrible choice I had ever made. Choose. It hissed, its voice a freezing wind curling around my heart. Will you pay your penance or join us in the darkness? That was when a single, piercing scream shattered the air. Not mine. Not from the shadows, but unmistakably from the very woman who had led me here. It echoed through the chamber like a warning bell, a sound that flayed my soul alive, and I was left with one heart-stopping realization. The entity was prepared to claim her as its final prize, and if I did not act now, I might lose not just my own salvation but hers as well. And in that fragmented moment, a single horrifying thought crystallized in my mind, a choice so grotesque that it threatened to shatter me completely. What if to save her, I had to surrender my own existence entirely? I had to decide: consume the darkness or be consumed. The throbbing darkness surged around me like a living beast, suffocating and clawing, threatening to drag me into the very pits of despair that had consumed so many before me. My heart echoed in my ears, every thud reminding me of the stakes at hand. I looked at the woman draped across the sterile operating table. Her face, once serene, now twisted in anguish, the very image of my past, a tortured reflection of my choices. I had to act, but what could I do against an entity born from my failures? Help us, please, she whispered, desperation etched into the lines of her face. The shadow that loomed behind her pulsed with a malevolent joy. Only you can break the cycle that binds us all. The air crackled with energy, the oppressive weight of loss hanging on my shoulders like a funeral shroud, stifling but oddly familiar. I felt each lost soul pressing against my skin, their cries mingling with the relentless laughter of the darkness, a cacophony that twisted at my sanity. Yet in this moment, I was flooded with resolve. I won't be your puppet any longer, I shouted, summoning the remnants of light that pulsed within me. The dark entity shrieked, recoiling as I thrust my hand towards it, channeling the flickering remnants of hope I possessed. I will not forsake her or anyone else again. The shadows flinched as I forced the light into manifestation, illuminating the twisted realm and fending off the grasping tendrils that sought to consume me. The apparition writhed, its laughter replaced by furious roars as it contended with my defiance. Fool! It screeched, shifting, morphing into grotesque forms, faces of patience, loved ones lost to suffering. You don't understand. They will not forgive you. In that moment, I felt the warmth of the woman's presence next to me, her eyes shining with the slightest flicker of hope. All they need is acknowledgement, she murmured, her voice blending with the light growing stronger around us. Only through understanding can we achieve liberation. Waves of energy surged around me, coiling tighter with every word spoken, a vibrant filament weaving our collective sorrow into the fabric of light. I acknowledge you, I cried out, each syllable breaking through my walls of guilt. I see your pain, your suffering, and I am so deeply sorry for what happened. The shadows shuddered, slithering back as they recoiled from the embrace of my light. You think words will save you? The entity screeched, but its voice wavered, fear creeping into the malevolent core. You cannot unwrite the past. I will not be defined by it, I shouted, propelled forward by the force of all those I had let down. I will confront it. My hands burned with energy as the light emanated fiercely, penetrating the heart of the shadow hell-bent on consuming me. And then I felt the darkness inside me, an abyss I long thought impenetrable. It began to writhe, twisting in response to my defiance, and out came a scream that pierced the very heavens. The shadows formed around me, morphing back into facetious procession of the lost. Help us, they cried, their voices a mournful blend echoing through the halls of my mind. I steeled myself, staring into the heart of the shadow, the twisted visage of myself grinning wickedly. You have a choice to make, it taunted. But something was shifting in its tone, a hint of desperation creeping into its cadence. Enough, I roared, driving the energy forward in a blinding flash that illuminated every corner of this deadly theater. My own reflection twisted and shrank before me, the shadows around it shattering, dissolving like mist. Each echoing scream began to feel distant, muted under the strength of my awakened determination. One final surge, fueled by the memories of every single soul lost, every mournful cry, every regret transformed into raw power. Light erupted forth from within, engulfing the figures lost in my shadows. I will not allow fear to dictate my existence, I screamed, watching their faces distort, their pain melding into whispered reliases. A torrent of shadows burned and purified before my eyes. Then, something shifted. A crack in the darkness opened painfully wide, pain mingling with liberation as one by one, the souls reclaimed their lives in those final fleeting moments. I felt them break free, the veil of anguish lifting as laughter intertwined with tears of joy began to echo around me. But just as I thought I had won, the echo of my shadow returned, angered yet reduced to whispers. You cannot escape your legacy. You are bound to me. The room began to fade, shadows tightening their hold over me, seeking to reclaim their master. This is not over, my double shrieked, the malignancy of its being seeping back into the cracks of reality. Grasping for the darkness that threatened to fracture, I had become the very reflection of my own haunting. The realization descended upon me. Perhaps I would never outrun the specters of my past, but I could define my future. Face it all, I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. This is my journey. We are all entwined, but I will not succumb as the shadows clawed at my spirit. A surge of strength allowed me to withstand their grasp, but with each push, a sliver of despair gnawed at my heart. Then I saw her again, the woman, reaching out to me, her eyes alight with warmth, transcending the darkness that sought to claim both of us. And I knew that the fight was not just for myself, but for every life that I had touched, every soul ID left behind. And I will break this curse that links us, I swore, my voice solid and unyielding, and you will never be forgotten. And as the shadows loomed one last time, I felt the rush of power within me surge like a roaring ocean. Me final reckoning against that which had sought to devour my heart. Before the abyss could claim me, I gripped the edges of light, knowing that in the end, I would not only confront my terrors but embrace the truth that had set me free. As the darkness exploded into brilliant white, I thought I could almost hear the faint remnants of souls finding solace at last, as I was torn from their realm, carried forth by the echoes of my choices finally set right. But just as relief washed over me, a chill settled deep within my chest. The reflections of those face-off her lingered at the edge of consciousness, fragile and haunting. In the cacophony of my awakening, I heard a whisper, felt the weight of a lingering gaze. You may have chosen to fight, but you will never be free from me. And in that soft echo, dread coiled around my heart like a serpent. A reminder that in the depths of darkness, one choice can reshape the very essence of who we truly are, forever haunted by the shadows we pretend to leave behind.